The latest Halloween Horror Nights 2026 speculation map from Hallowed Out Horror dropped last week. And honestly, this might be the most important HHN 2026 rumour update that we've had so far. This isn't just a random fan wish list. There are a lot of reasons to believe that what we see here is actually a very accurate look of what Universal Orlando has got planned for us in 2026. From Stranger Things, Ozzy Osbourne, Hellraiser and Sinners, and even some really interesting scare zone rumours. But how seriously should we take this latest map? Is it accurate, or is it just speculation? Well, based on what happened last year, are we looking at something that could end up being incredibly close to the final event? And in this video, we're going to break it all down. We're going to uncover just how accurate the spec map was in 2025. We'll look at exactly what Universal announced and when those announcements happened. We'll look at how closely last year's spec map lined up with the final event. And then we're going to come back to this latest 2026 HHN spec map and ask the big question. What can we expect next? And when are those next announcements likely to happen? So make sure you stick around until the end, because I'm going to give you my best prediction for when we could see the next 2026 Halloween Horror Nights house announcement, when the scare zones might be revealed, and more importantly, when those multi-night tickets could finally go on sale. So grab your fog machine, turn the lights down, and let's get into it. Now, before we go any further, a quick and important point. Speculation maps are not official Universal announcements. They are rumours, whispers, construction clues, permit watching, industry chatter, educated guesses, and sometimes very clever pattern recognition. All of these things rolled into one. So no, we should not treat this as 100% confirmed. But at the same time, HHN fans know that some speculation maps are much more than just random guessing. And when a map comes from people who have got a track record of being pretty accurate in previous years, well, that's when it becomes really interesting. And that's exactly where we are right now. The latest HHN 2026 spec map includes some huge names. Let's get the stuff we already know out of the way. So we've got those classic horror icons of HHN returning. We've got Jack the Clown and Oddfellow. And that's going to be a house called Chaos on Control. That's already been confirmed. And then very recently, we found out that one of the best vampire movies of all time, Sinners, has got its place in HHN history. Really looking forward to that house. But there's a few other things that the map shows. We've got the return of Stranger Things. We've got an Ozzy Osbourne house. We've got the Carey Zoo, Feeding Time, Evil Dead Burn, the return of HR Bloodengutz, another HHN classic icon, Invasion of Lightning Gulch, Seek and Destroy, and one that everybody in the community is really thirsty for, and that is Hellraiser. So that's a massive lineup, if it happens. It feels like a proper anniversary year lineup. A huge mix of IPs, legacy HHN icons and characters, returning fan favourites, and as always, some really weird and creative original horror when we look at some of those original houses and some of the titles that are rumoured to be coming through. But before we deep dive into this map and what it shows us, there's one important question to answer. How good was this kind of speculation last year? Because if last year's map was way off, then we might want to take this with a huge pinch of salt. But if last year's map was accurate, and we're going to see just how accurate that map was, then HHN fans might want to pay very close attention to this one. So let's rewind to Halloween Horror Nights 34, Universal Orlando's 2025 event. The final confirmed house lineup for HHN 2025 was Fallout, Jason Universe, Five Nights at Freddy's, the House of the Year, Terrifier, something a bit different with the HHN and WWE wrestling crossover, The Horrors of Wyatt 6. We had Hatchet and Chains, Demon Bounty Hunters. Then what many fans described as the best original house and incredibly well executed, El Artista, A Spanish Haunting, Dolls, Let's Play Dead, Grave of Flesh, and then finally Gold King Monsters of the North. Now the announcement schedule is really important here because it gives us a clue about what Universal might do again this year. For HHN 2025, Universal started properly revealing the lineup in early June. The first major announcement was Fallout, which was announced on June the 5th of 2025. Then Friday the 13th, June 13th, 2025, we all knew it was coming, and Universal announced Jason Universe, bringing Jason Voorhees back into HHN conversation in a huge way. Then came a wave of original houses in late June. El Artista, a Spanish haunting, was revealed on June the 20th at horror convention Spooky Empire. Hatchet and Chains Demon Bounty Hunters was announced on June the 23rd. We then had 3 days in a row of announcements. Dolls Let's Play Dead came on June the 25th, followed by Grave of Flesh on June the 26th, and Gulking Monsters of the North on June the 27th. Then in July, Universal kept the bigger IP reveals going. This was one that had been rumoured and was really anticipated by the community, and that was Terrifier, announced officially on July the 10th. Then on July the 29th, Universal completed the lineup with Five Nights at Freddy's. They had hinted back on the 2nd of June that Five Nights was coming to HHN, but they didn't officially confirm it as a house until July the 29th. And the same day we got news that WWE Presents The Horrors of Wyatt 6 would bring a very different genre mashup to HHN 34. And those two announcements completed the house lineup. Then on 5 consecutive days in July, we got confirmation of our scare zones. On July the 14th, we learned about Origins of Horror. The next day, Masquerade Dance with Death. That was followed by the announcement of the Cat Lady of Crooked Lane. On July the 17th, we learned about Mutations, Toxic 20s. And then finally, July the 18th, Club Horror and Male Zombies. So the big announcement pattern for 2025 was in early June, first major IP, mid-June, another headline IP, late June, original house reveal week, mid to late July, final major IPs and full lineup. And this matters because HHN 2026 started even earlier, with confirmation of the event dates, Jack and Oddfellow House, and now Sinners. But based on last year, we still might not know the full picture until late July. So how much did Hallowed Out Horrors 2025 speculation map get things right? Well, the version 3 spec map was published on the May the 15th, 2025. That means it came out 21 days before Universal had officially even announced its first house. Yes, 3 whole weeks before we started seeing those official announcements drop. And when you compare that map to what actually happened, it was remarkably accurate. Let's go through it. The speculation map showed the horrors of WWE, and what we ended up with was WWE Presents The Horrors of Wyatt 6. That is a very strong hit. The map had the legacy of Voorhees, and then on Friday the 13th, Universal officially announced Jason Universe. Different name, same core IP, same character. For me, that's another strong hit. The map showed Five Nights at Freddy's. What we got was Five Nights at Freddy's, another direct hit. The map showed Fallout. Universal's first house announcement was Fallout, another direct hit. The map showed Terrifier, and Universal announced the most anticipated house, Terrifier, a direct hit. Let's move on to the non-IP houses. The map showed Hatchet and Chains, the Demon Bounty Hunter. That's exactly what we got, a direct hit. The map showed the Artist Dark Manor. Now the final house that was revealed at Spooky Empire was El Artista, a Spanish haunting. Now for me, close enough, that's a hit. We then had Tortured Toys. The final house became Dolls Let's Play Dead. Again, not the same title, the concept's very close, toys, dolls, childhood objects, turned terrifying. So for me, that's close. We then had Harvest Moon Viking Village. The final house was Gulking Monsters of the North. That's not exactly correct, but the Nordic monster direction was clearly there. So for me, that one was close. And then the one that was a little bit more off was Holmouth Cemetery Roots and Shadows. Now it didn't line up completely, but if you think about the name and what it's indicating, Grave of Flesh was pretty close as well. And so depending on how strict you want to be, last year's map was around, I would say 70 to 80% absolutely spot on. And you could be a little bit more generous with some of those that were really close and probably say they got around 9 out of 10 correct. And that is huge because remember, this was a map from mid-May and a lot of the official announcements didn't happen until June and July. Now when it comes to the scare zones, they're not quite so on the ball. They had Blum Zone, which indicated there would be some kind of a Blumhouse scare zone like we saw in 2024, but that didn't happen. Werecats, you could possibly say that the Cat Lady of Crooked Lane is a very tenuous link there. And then finally Monsters Masquerade. Well, we had Masquerade Dance with Death, so the title was almost there, but not quite as strong with the scare zones. However, we did see the return of Nightmare Fuel as part of the live entertainment lineup, so they nailed that one. But overall, I would say these spec maps much stronger in determining the trajectory of the houses versus the scare zones. So now we've seen how accurate last year was, let's go through the latest HHN 35 speculation map and talk about what feels strong and what feels likely and what still feels a little uncertain. Let's start with the IP stuff. First up, Stranger Things. This one immediately gets people talking. Stranger Things has already been a part of Halloween Horror Nights history with houses on both coasts in 2018, 2019 and 2023. And with the final season this year, it would make a lot of sense for Universal to bring it back for a major anniversary year. And the case for Stranger Things is simple. It's huge, it's mainstream, it brings in the casual fans, it gives Universal a headline IP that can sell tickets beyond the hardcore HHN community. And it'll probably sell a lot of merchandise too, let's face it. And if HHN 35 is meant to feel big, then Stranger Things gives them that broad pop culture hook. Now, there were some rumours that the contract negotiations between Netflix and Universal were challenging this year. And with Netflix having dined out on this IP for several years and the series now coming to an end, you can understand they want to make as much money as they can off the back of this. But hopefully that has not strained the relationship and we will see a return this year of Stranger Things at Halloween Horror Nights. And if it does happen, expect Universal to treat this as one of the biggest announcements of the season, and it will be a key feature in the advertising during the build up to the event. I would put this in the category of very likely to happen. Now let's talk about Ozzy. This is one of the most interesting rumours on the map, and HHN has played in the music horror space before, and an Ozzy inspired house would fit perfectly. Ozzy embraced the horror genre. You've only got to listen to his lyrics and some of the darker theatrical performances, both as a solo artist and across his years with Black Sabbath. So it makes perfect sense and would be a fantastic tribute to an absolute rock legend. On forums and fan discussions, Ozzy's been one of those rumours that just keeps popping up. And Jack Osbourne's recent reaction during a YouTube live Q&A has ignited that speculation. It's not what he said, it's what he didn't say. He kind of dodged the question, he looked a little bit sheepish, and that gave people an indication that he was holding something back. But then we have a recent post on X from John Murdy, the creative director at Universal Hollywood, which maybe shows a different direction. A lifelong Ozzy fan, it was John who worked with Ozzy and Black Sabbath back in 2013 with the creation of Black Sabbath 13, the 3D haunted maze that featured in HHN Hollywood. Now, John is great in engaging with the HHN community on X, and he often responds and actively engages conversation with the fans. And when asked last week if we were getting an Ozzy house, John replied, "No, but you're close," indicating an Ozzy house might not be the exact IP that we end up with, but for me that could indicate maybe another Sabbath collaboration, and on a personal level that is what I really want to see. An earlier rumour was a potential team up with Ice 9 Kills, and at one point even Lady Gaga house was being talked about. I would say the likelihood of an Ozzy or Sabbath house happening in this year is probably around 50-50, but it's probably the one that I've got my fingers crossed for the most, as I would love to see this happen. Next up, Evil Dead Burn. Now, Evil Dead is one of those franchises that always feels like it belongs at HHN. It's gory, it's chaotic, it can be funny, certainly the originals were, it's intense, and it has a really strong fan base. Now, Evil Dead has featured 4 times before at HHN, and the last offering was in 2023 in HHN Hollywood, and it was a house based on Evil Dead Rise. Now, I thought this house looked amazing, and I was disappointed that it didn't make its way over to the East Coast. But many hardcore fans of the classic Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell movies, they didn't take very well to Evil Dead Rise. It lacked the slapstick humour that Ash fans were used to. It was much darker. Now, personally, I loved that movie. I watched it on my own in a movie theatre, and it was one of the best horror experiences that I've ever had going to a cinema. And looking at recently released Evil Dead Burn trailers, I think this movie is going to be up there with the intensity of Evil Dead Rise. I think this could make for one of the scariest houses that we'll see, and I think the likelihood of this one happening is pretty high. Hellraiser. Now, this is one that appeared on some of the very first speculation maps. Based on Clive Barker's novel Hellbound Heart, the movie adaptation created a visual interpretation of the Cenobites that was totally terrifying. But more importantly, it propelled Pinhead to become a horror icon, worthy of his place alongside the likes of Freddy, Leatherface and Jason. And that makes it even more surprising that Hellraiser has never had its own dedicated house before at HHN. Now, Clive Barker, the author, has collaborated with HHN previously, so it will be interesting to see if he would be part of the creative team if this does happen. In addition to Pinhead and the other Cenobites, the atmospheric landscape of the Hellraiser franchise lends itself brilliantly to HHN. Chains, puzzle boxes, darkness and pain. It's got all the right ingredients, but will it happen? Well, it's been reported that back in 2015, Hellraiser was due to get its own house at HHN, and it was heavily in the development phase, and then it was cancelled. Due to licensing disputes with Dimension Films, who were the rights holders at the time, and their partners, they were disputing around the specific version of characters and the sequels that Universal were allowed to use. So in the end, Universal did all this work, all this planning, and it got cancelled at the last minute, and it was ultimately replaced by The Purge. Now, following a landmark 2021 legal settlement, Clive Barker recaptured the US copyright for his original story, and that includes the characters, and that includes Pinhead. So, with Barker being an HHN fan and a collaborator on previous houses, this makes the likelihood all more possible. I think this one will happen, and I think it could be the next official announcement. Sinners. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time here because we know it's confirmed, but all I would say that is back in 2013, my favourite house was The Darkest Deal. This house was a reenactment of that classic story of a blues musician who sells his soul to the devil in exchange for musical glory and fame. Now, when I watched Sinners last year, I was immediately taken back to that house. The smells, the straw on the floor, the old honky-tonk style blues dive bar, and I remember thinking as I was watching Sinners, this would make a great Halloween Horror Nights house. And now it seems that my wish has come true. I'm looking forward to this one a lot. Now let's move on to the originals, Chaos and Control. Now, my very first HHN was back in 2007 when I attended Carnival of Carnage, and it was this night that I fell in love with Halloween Horror Nights, and it was my first introduction to Jack the Clown. Now, Dr. Oddfellow first appeared at Halloween Horror Nights in 2000 as part of Jack the Clown's backstory inside Fear House. He later returned a couple of years back in 2023, not only as the icon, but with his own house, Dr. Oddfellow's Twisted Origins, which I thought was a really fun house. So bringing these two together makes perfect sense, especially for an anniversary year. So like many HHN fans, I was really excited when they dropped this as the very first announcement back in March 21st during the Behind the Screams panel at MegaCon. This one is a definite and I am definitely excited for it. Now let's talk about the Carey Zoo feeding time. This one feels very HHN. The town of Carey, Ohio is woven into Halloween Horror Nights' original lore, serving as a dark backbone that links iconic characters and haunted attractions through multiple years, including Jack the Clown, Dr. Oddfellow, Shady Brook Asylum. There's lots of stories that really base themselves back in Carey, Ohio, and a creepy zoo concept gives you a lot to play with. Animal cages, feeding areas, escaped creatures, mutated handlers. Again, I think this is going to be one where the title might change, but we will have a zoo-themed horror house connected with HHN folklore. So if you know HHN history, HR Bloodengutz is a beloved original character from the event's past. So bringing him back for the 35th anniversary year would be a perfect fan service move. It lets Universal celebrate HHN history while still doing something new. Now this could be one of those houses that hardcore fans absolutely love, and this is why anniversary years are exciting. It's not just about the big IPs, it's about Universal digging into its own horror mythology. I personally look forward to the original houses more than the IPs. The creative teams at Universal are absolute genius, and bringing new concepts every single year is what makes this event so special, even when they're leaning into the lore. And then we have Invasion of the Lightning Gulch. This sounds like a sci-fi western original, and honestly this is the kind of weird combination that HHN can do better than almost anyone. A dusty frontier town, a sudden alien invasion, cattle mutations, UFO beams cutting through saloon windows, cowboys versus aliens. It sounds like one of those things that could be funny, scary, and visually different from the rest of the lineup. Original houses need variety. We don't want 10 houses that feel like dark corridors with monsters and scare jumps, and a sci-fi western could stand out massively. This is one of those houses where I think the title's going to be different from what we see on the spec map, but the concept will be aligned, and we will see some kind of a sci-fi western maze at HHN 35. And lastly, Seek and Destroy. Now this one is a bit more mysterious. The title suggests something aggressive, industrial, maybe military, could be some kind of dystopian future. It might be robots or monsters hunting humans. I just don't know. At this stage, I would treat this as one of the less clear rumours on the map, but that does not mean it's not likely. So let me know in the comments if your mind goes on a different journey. What do you guys think this one could be? I'd be interested to know. Let's quickly touch on the scare zones. As previously mentioned, the spec maps are usually a lot more cryptic and a lot less accurate than they are with the houses when it comes to scare zones, but let's see what we have. 35 years of fear. So it's an anniversary year. Let's expect to see previous icons like the caretaker, the director, the storyteller, Bloody Mary, Lady Luck. This would be a great scare zone if it happens. Clowns of HHN. Now this indicates it could be a zone featuring multiple clowns from the archives of horror. Fans have been screaming for an It house or zone for many years, and that's always seemed unlikely due to rights and agreements, and even with the Welcome to Derry TV show bringing a refreshed resurgence to Pennywise, I think that it's unlikely we're going to see Pennywise making an appearance. Now we do have Jack the Clown, and there's no reason that we couldn't have him appear in both a house, a scare zone, and possibly even a show. We had Terrifier last year, and as we know, he had his own house, but he was also, we saw Art roaming the streets and creating some really great interactions with fans, so that's a possibility. And if the construction rumours are anything to go by, we will see the return of Killer Clowns from Outer Space at Halloween Horror Nights Hollywood, which again opens the doors to have them featured in this scare zone alongside some other famous clowns, which could make for a brilliant scare zone for 2026. Realm of the Pumpkin. Again, we know that Universal like to bring out the icons for the anniversary years, and it's heavily rumoured that we will see the return of the Pumpkin Lord. He featured in the last big birthday at HHN 30, so it's not too far-fetched to think that we might see him return with his very own scare zone. And I even saw a suggestion that he could be the DJ if Club Horror Scare Zone makes a return this year. Now that would be cool. Fort Nightmares. Now I've heard some whispers of this and also some pretty negative comments about this inclusion, but two things. Firstly, HHN has done very well with video game franchise crossovers before. Resident Evil, Silent Hill, The Last of Us, to name a few. And the other bonus is that sometimes using a video game as the core IP means that you can navigate the movie studios. NECA have been doing this a lot with their figure releases. Base them on the game, it's the same characters, but without the complications of dealing with lots of different licensing partners. And let's face it, Fort Nightmares features Jason, Ghostface, Michael Myers, Leatherface, Billy the Puppet, Ash from the Evil Dead, Chucky, The Grabber, just to name a few. The list is endless. Imagine having all of those legends lined up in a scare zone. Now that would be amazing. And finally, Shady Oak Cemetery. And this one points back to HHN folklore. It's the home of the previous HHN icon, the Caretaker, and one of the most important locations in the entire Carey, Ohio mythology. This could happen, but personally I think if they're going to have a dedicated 35 years scare zone with appearances from previous icons, I would want to see the Caretaker making an appearance there. So I'm inclined to take this one with a pinch of salt. And finally, let's touch on the live entertainment. So for the last 5 years, Nightmare Fuel has been the staple live entertainment event at HHN. And it seems that this year it's rumoured that we will not see the return of Nightmare Fuel. And this was pretty much confirmed last week when we saw a post from the Fuel Girls, who are the main talent behind Nightmare Fuel. And they posted they would be touring this summer as part of a different show. So that almost pretty much confirms that we're not going to see Nightmare Fuel making a return in 2026. It's heavily rumoured that we're going to see a Jack and Chance show, as well as the return of the Lagoon show and Mel's Dine-In Zombies. I thought that this was a fun addition last year. I'm not sure that I would put Mel's Dine-In Zombies in entertainment personally. I think it's more like a mini scare zone, but either way it was fun and it would be good to see that coming back. So what can we expect in terms of announcements? Well, this year's version 3 spec map came a week later versus last year, and let's remember we've already seen 2 house announcements so far. Now last year at the Spooky Empire event there was a house announcement, as we know. But this year, Spooky Empire event took place just this weekend and there was no mention of HHN, so no announcement there. Now my feeling is personally, I think over the next couple of weeks, we're going to start to see announcements pretty much in line with what we saw last year. So some coming around mid-June, right through to kind of mid-July, and then we're going to start to really take shape and understand which of these rumours are really actually going to come to fruition. Just remember that the closer we get to the event, the more people there will be working on HHN, and therefore there's more chance of leaks, people talking outside of school, and Universal don't want that. They want to be able to announce the news firsthand. So it's in their interests to make sure that they get the information out there and that communication is coming from them. So remember last year, in early June, there was an announcement that says Five Nights at Freddy's is coming. We didn't know if it was a scare zone. We didn't know if it was a house. Now the word on the street is that there was a leak, and actually Universal quickly took hold of that and put something out there in terms of press communications, because they didn't want that to be coming out from anybody else. The official house wasn't announced to the end of July. So that just goes to show how sometimes this information, sometimes these rumours, they can get out there before Universal really want to get a handle on them. And what about the multi-night tickets? Well, if history is anything to go by, we should start to see those in the second week of July. So in 2023, they went on sale on July the 13th. In 2024, it was July the 11th. And then last year, on July the 10th, those tickets went out. One thing to be aware of, some of these multi-night tickets, particularly the ones with express options, they sold out within hours. So you've got to be pretty fast to get those. My tip would be go and follow the official HHN social media pages. So particularly go onto X or Twitter, if you want to call it that, and follow the HHN page. Make sure that you've got notifications set up, and that way, as soon as they announce it, you can be, real fast with your fingers, get on your phone and get those tickets. So what do you guys think of the spec map? Do you think it's accurate? What houses do you want to see coming to HHN 2026? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Parks and Parades for more shortcuts to the horror. See you on the next video.